Hello everybody, welcome to episode number 2 of the Mo Baseball and Training Podcast. My name is Eric Mojica, your host for the show. So today our guest is Cage Cascone. Cage was a junior college player who transferred to an NAIA school at Avila University where me and Cage became teammates. And a year after that, he became an independent ball pitcher, and he first signed with the Vallejo Admirals, eventually went to the San Rafael Pacifics, and eventually moved on to the Salinas Stockade. So in this episode, Cage and I dive into professional baseball, all the ins and outs as far as networking, getting to know coaches, scouts, and how to give yourself more opportunities to continue your career as a professional baseball player. But what's probably most important out of this entire conversation that we had was the developmental side as a pitcher, developing your command, your stuff, velocity, athleticism on the mound. So here Cage is going to share with us his entire journey through junior college all the way into independent baseball, all the weight training, throwing programs, pitch design, stuff like that. And he's also, towards the middle and end of the show, we're going to talk about some of our favorite pitchers. If you're watching this in video, we got some video of those guys and exactly the mechanics that we're talking about. If you're listening in audio, make sure you tune in to the YouTube channel and you can see those videos there. But nevertheless, this is episode number 2 of the Mo Baseball and Training Podcast. This episode begins right now. All right, so our guest today is Cage Cascone. We were teammates at Avila, both pitchers for the program, and Cage has also gotten into independent ball. So, Cage, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be on.
All right, man. Well, you and I are really good friends, man. We got to be teammates for a couple of years, but just wanted you to kind of introduce to our audience, who you are, what was your journey like through baseball, and where are you at today?
Well, it's been a pretty long journey. I grew up in Pacifica, California, and I played high school ball there. And then I ended up moving to Santa Cruz, California for college ball for 2 years, my first 2 years of junior college at Cabrillo College. And then I spent one more year at Skyline, which was when I moved back into my house in Pacifica. And then I went out to Kansas City, played and finished up and got my degree there while playing ball out there. And then I took a year off from playing after that, and then I ended up getting signed into professional baseball with the Vallejo Admirals. And then I spent a full year with Vallejo in 2018, and then I re-signed with them in 2019. Got released halfway through, signed to San Rafael Pacifics. Spent only a few games with them before getting released, and then I finished up with the Salinas Stockade. I spent about a week with them. So, and there was just this year was a very difficult year, and it's a year where I would have to kind of do what I did in junior college to kind of I'd have to think about how to get better again, kind of like what I did in junior college. And I just didn't feel like I really had to do that last 3 years. So that's kind of where I'm at now. I'm just kind of looking at how, if I want to play another year, what would I have to do to improve and get back on track? So
it's a real grind, right? I remember in the college days, we're talking about 5 a.m. conditioning, and we're like, oh, we're grinding, we're working hard. Weights got us so sore, and we still got to go through. Oh my God. Yep. It's got to be a completely different type of grind. Can you tell us more about that as far as what it's like being a pro player, but then knowing that, any day you could get cut?
Well, the thing is, last year, I think that was the first year. That was probably the more difficult of the two in some ways, because last year we had 80 games in 3 months, so we ended up playing every day. We only got Mondays off. So at first, the reason why I guess I handled the pressure so well is because I had zero expectations. I was kind of okay, this team just signed me. I'll probably get shelled and just get asked to go home. So I wasn't really expecting a lot out of myself. But then I ended up doing well and establishing my spot. And I wasn't really afraid of being released last year because I knew I was doing well and I knew it was an asset. So I ended up pitching well for that team last year. And my expectations definitely increased for myself this year. And so this spring on the road tour, I went onto this long road trip with this program called the Black Sox. And what happened was I basically pitched against a lot of Frontier League teams. I pitched against some American Association teams. I pitched against any other leagues. I didn't pitch in the Atlantic League games, but anyway, I ended up doing really well against these spring training games against these teams, and my expectations went through the roof. And then that was a lot different mentally. When you have high expectations for yourself, you start I found I was a little more afraid to fail this year, and I think that was my biggest hurdle to get over, was the mental side of the game, along with the fact that I like biomechanically, I went into a little bit of a slump. Like I was really clean on the road tour. Everything was working great. And then I got into a little bit of a slump, and then combined with those little expectations I had for myself, I think I just kind of spiraled out of control a little bit this year. And that was something I had to learn to deal with. I could see that as a learning experience, or I could see it as a failure. And I think I'm going to try to see that as a learning experience for next year.
Uh-huh. So you're a psychology major, so did that help, or did it make things a little bit more complicated for you?
So it can make things a little more complicated when you're overthinking everything, and you're trying to self-diagnose and stuff. So I wouldn't say that really was an asset, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So let's talk about development. So when you were in junior college, how hard were you throwing? Where were you at with your mechanics and your stuff?
Well, in high school, I mean, like right before junior college, I was like throwing mid 80s, 83, 85, 86, like in that range. And I figured if I just improved upon that a little bit, I'd be high 80s, maybe 90, 91, go Division I, blah, blah, blah. But what ended up happening was I kind of broke down in junior college, and my velocity dipped from like mid 80s to like 80-ish, 80, 79, 81. And I was just like, that probably wasn't that big of a deal back then. I think you could probably be pretty good at that level throwing 80. But at the time I saw it was like a big problem. So I started searching for answers like immediately. I went to the internet. I started like looking how I could throw harder. And back in like 2010, 2011, everyone's trying to say that you can't throw harder. You know, there's only so much you can do. You can't really do this. But then I found Brent Porcio from Top Velocity, and I learned a lot from his program about what kind of lifting you need to be doing, like what kind of biomechanics you need to have. He kind of like analyzed my mechanics and showed me like what I could be doing to get my velocity back on track. And that was actually really challenging for me, especially since like his program was so much different back then. Like he didn't, you couldn't really go to his camp for a very long amount of time. Like I don't think he was offering like months at a time yet. So you had to go there for like 3 days and learn as much as you could in those 3 days. And then I struggled to I was implementing the program through junior college, but I didn't see a whole lot of results until like later on in my career.
And so did those results come by, do you think, because of just continuing through that process of still going through all the lifts and the drill work and stuff? Or did you kind of just tap into other things through the process?
Yeah, I was pretty dead set on the whole Olympic lifting thing then. I was and the med ball drills and stuff, all the throwing drills I was doing, I was pretty I was doing that pretty religiously. So I think it just took a lot of reps. I had to do. Yeah. It just took many years of doing those reps, and not being naturally that big, or I don't think I was naturally super strong. The program works really well for guys that are naturally tall, big. They get their strength numbers up quick. So I had to really plug away and make sure that I was like increasing my numbers and all this stuff. So it just took a matter of time for me, and a lot of trial and error that I probably did too. More error than success, but eventually I found it. So
yeah, and so I want to know what your take is on when it comes to the Olympic lifting. What are the true benefits? What did you experience? What were the physical changes that you started to see over time as far as doing like power cleans and snatches? Because I remember when I first got to meet you, you're in the weight room and you're busting through all of these like crazy exercises with all this weight and being able to have amazing balance and mobility. And so before I knew all this stuff about strength conditioning, I saw that and I was like, whoa, like this guy's freakishly strong. But as I got to learn through more strength conditioning, Olympic lifting doesn't always have to be about, can you squat 500 pounds? It's a lot about how efficient can you move to be able to move a certain amount of weight. So can you go into that and talk about how that transfers into pitching, or how you experience that whole process?
I just remember like my sophomore year of college is when I started doing enough Olympic lifting, or not my redshirt freshman year. So my second year of college was when I started doing enough Olympic lifting to start kind of feeling a difference in my body, like in terms of my performance on the field. So what I first noticed was like I noticed a big increase in like the springiness of my legs. Like I started feeling, an increased vertical jump. I started running faster. I started getting into these crazy positions that I couldn't get into before in terms of my mobility, and that was actually a really addicting feeling. I was like, wow, I want more of this. I want more of this. So I was constantly busting my ass, with the Olympic lifts to get that more of that explosive feeling, and it just felt like it was translating my delivery pretty well. I felt like I started throwing a little harder. The velocity increasing to a baseball, the Olympic lifts, increasing my pitching velocity took a little bit, but the Olympic lifts, increasing my delivery pretty well. I felt like I started throwing a little harder. The velocity increasing to a baseball, the Olympic lifts, increasing my pitching velocity took a little bit, but the Olympic lifts, increasing my pitching velocity took a little bit, The results on like running and jumping and sprinting and all that stuff, that was enough to convince me straight away that Olympic lifts are good, and it does make you more athletic and more efficient.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so, did you also get into any like arm care programs? Like, I don't think I remember seeing you doing a lot of band work and like stuff in the trainer's room, but
Yeah, I was never like big into like Jaeger bands or anything. What I mostly did was like I did do a lot of arm care work that's not necessarily seen as arm care work in the baseball community. Like I did a lot of I did bicep curls, I did like hammer curls, I did forearm curls, I did a lot of grip strength work, I did a lot of rotator cuff exercises, I did bench press, I did overhead stability work, I did overhead press. I don't care to me. I'm never against like bands and stuff, but I usually do that stuff. I would prefer to do that stuff post throw rather than I see a lot of guys do rep it out pre throwing, and I just think it'd be better to break down your muscles and your especially your small muscles like in your shoulder. I think that'd be better to do that after throwing.
uh, and that's what's really interesting about all these different types of programs, right? Because I'm just a believer that there's no one, cookie cut program for anybody. And
No.
some people, they may actually feel a huge benefit doing some band work because maybe they have a very weak rotator cuff, as to where you probably develop so much strength doing all these overhead movements where you can hold those positions, and you've developed that strength so you don't need as much. And so
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting, and whenever I have like a lot of the kids that I get to work with, that I coach and do strength and conditioning stuff with, they ask me like, should I be throwing weighted balls? Should I be throwing medicine balls? Should I be Olympic lifting? Should I do like bodybuilding type of stuff? And it's like, there's like a general like consensus of like what things baseball players should do, but like to say that this is this way or nothing else, I think that's pretty wrong to be teaching young
Yeah.
kids.
I don't think cookie cutter programs or pigeonholing people works in baseball. So I agree with
Mm-hmm.
you on that.
And so I know that you do lessons with kids, right? Back
Yeah.
there. So, what kind of stuff do you have them go through? I mean, do you have access to doing weightlifting stuff with them? Or are you just kind of doing mechanical work? Like, kind of dive into that a little bit.
Yeah. So I kind of try to put together like a comprehensive program for my kids, and most of my kids are younger than 15, and I think actually all of them are younger than 15. But yeah, so what I have them do usually is start out with some sort of not necessarily a long toss program, but they obviously go through usually at the start. But then I'll have them do a lot of hip to shoulder separation drills. Like that was one big thing that I noticed that really helped with a lot of my clients was isolating hip to shoulder, especially these young kids. They got all this range of motion in their bodies. They're really loose, and I think it's a really good age to try and teach them to really make the most of their range of motion in their bodies. So I have them do drills where they put their back leg out in front, and then they twist back, and then they isolate that movement, and and also work on it also simultaneously works on their arm action and like their external rotation, internal rotation,
Mm-hmm.
um, stuff like that. And I kind of like eventually take those movements and I teach them how to build it into their full delivery. And I think the biggest thing that they struggle with usually is, going from these isolated hip to shoulder drills where they can just get in that position, easily because they're isolating it. But then when they actually have to incorporate that with like a full stride and a full pitching delivery, that's their biggest challenge. So, and a lot of that's usually because they're small and weak and because they can't stride, they can't load their leg properly, they can't drive their hip through properly. So I do a lot of I do have a lot of strength work and a lot of conditioning at the end of my lessons. At San Bruno Park we happen to have like these we have these sandbags that are like probably 20 pounds each. So I'll have them do like lunges, I'll have them do squats, I'll have them deadlift that, I'll have them do explosive movements with that, I'll have them do jumps. I'm big into conditioning and strengthening even at a young age, and it definitely shows up in their performance on the field. And honestly, with the program that I coach at, we have them in a strength conditioning program already. So they go to this place called H3 Elite Sports, which teaches them like what they have them do a lot of quick twitch conditioning, and the older kids start the weightlifting. So it's like what I do kind of supplements that, and then it definitely shows up. So
So, a couple things that stood out what you just said. I think that you know what you're doing as far as like breaking down mechanics into segments, that's huge for motor learning, because I remember when I was a pitcher, it's really difficult to listen to a coach say, "Yep, I need you to do this, this, and this, and if you do these three things, your mechanics are going to be better. You're going to throw harder." But I always found myself only able to do one thing at a time, and then So through that experience, I've been able to work with kids and say, all right, you know what, today we're just going to work on the sequencing of our lower half and how we're going to be moving, what kind of rhythm, what kind of timing we're going to be trying to work with in this controlled environment. And then, once they start to get it, we go, all right, now we're going to jump onto this segment. And you need to remember what you got really good at doing here because this is how this and this connects. And so
Yeah.
you basically stack all this information little by little and progress it towards other things. And I think for me, just with my kinesiology background, what I know about motor behavior, that's probably the best way to get somebody to understand their mechanics and be able to perform them really consistently.
I think it's kind of similar to Olympic lifting. Like if you want someone, to get stronger on the snatch or the clean, you don't have them just do a bunch of snatch and cleans. You have them do a lot of accessory work. You have them front squat, and you want, in order for them to increase their clean, they have to increase their strength lifts, like their back squat and their deadlift. But you don't just have them deadlift a bunch. You also have them, or just have them back squat a bunch. You have them do front squats. It all works together and builds up, and it's all segmented. So I kind of try to use that approach in pitching too.
Yep, you got to crawl before you walk, and you got to walk before you sprint, right?
Exactly.
Yep. Awesome, man. So I want to kind of start to ask you again some more stuff about your journey, but as far as like stuff and command, which one do you think is more important, and tell us why?
Oh man, I think if you can command really well, but you just don't have the stuff, you're gonna get hit, and it doesn't really matter. Like if you throw a lot of strikes and you don't have good stuff, like professional hitters are just gonna tee off on you. But at the same time, if you've got good stuff and you don't command, I mean, I've seen so many guys at the professional level that throw mid to upper 90s that can't get outs because they have no idea where the ball is going. They walk people or they throw the ball over the plate. And to be honest with you, 94 to 97 miles an hour doesn't actually like like everyone says this, but professional hitters really can hit that. Even an independent ball, that's nothing if you just leave it over the plate. So I think you got to have a healthy balance of both. And the other thing too is that in the professional baseball, the strike zones are tiny. They're like you don't get corners. You got to really earn your strikes. I mean, you can eventually earn your corners, but you got to prove that you can pitch on the white of the plate. So if you're just trying to spot up with 81 and hit the black all the time, you're not going to get a lot of strikes. So I think you got to have stuff first, and then you got to have a reasonable amount of command at least. So
Yeah. And so the reason I asked that on your personal perspective on that is because when we got to become teammates, you were a guy who could throw really hard, and it kind of like you struggle with your command sometimes. And so, whereas for myself, I was always someone who had really good command, and my stuff wasn't good in terms of velocity, just because I was always really good at spinning the ball. But my first 2 years of college, I got hit around a decent amount, and so it's always been an interesting topic of conversation for me because it's always person to person, right? It varies, but what would you say? How would a young high school kid or maybe even a young college kid, how do they figure out which one they need to work on the most? I mean, what's your take on that?
well, I was gonna add one more thing too, but I think spin rate is like the number one thing that like determines how good your stuff is. Like I think if you've got a fastball that's let's say maybe 82 or so, but you've got like maybe a 25, 2600 spin rate on that, I mean that's gonna fool a lot of hitters because, or that's gonna get a lot of people out. I remember on my road tour with the Black Sox, um, I pitched against Cleburne, and they have a bunch of ex major leaguers in their lineup, and I think I gave up one real hit against them in like 4 innings, and I was throwing 86 to 87 on their radar gun, and I was also getting them out, and I think that had a lot to do with the spin rate of my fastball, which is around 2,500. But around as far as like a high school kid, like what I would recommend them to do is I'd say develop their stuff because they're so young and they got so much time. And people act like when you're 22, 23 and out of college, people act like that's super old. But in terms of independent ball, that's you're a baby. So it depends on how far you want to go. If you're 18 years old, you just want to play college baseball, I would say develop your command so you can be successful immediately at college, get your 4 years in, and be done. But if you're more of a hardcore baseball guy and you want to play until you can't anymore, 26, 27, 28, 30, whatever, you focus on your stuff and you get the stuff going because it's really hard to get to the next level if you don't have good stuff. If you don't have a high velocity and a good spin rate, and if you don't have a good plus breaking ball, you're probably gonna get ignored unless you get really lucky.
Yeah, and so that's just what's so interesting, and that's where like these type of conversations are kind of fun to have with hitters as well, just because like they view the game from a completely different perspective from ours, right? And so it's really interesting just to kind of get into a hitter's mind. And I feel like that's what allowed me to be successful as I was in college was I always put myself in the mindset of the hitter because I knew my stuff wasn't going to be that great. I knew that I was going to blow any fastballs by them. But if I caught them off guard and I made them look for an off-speed pitch and I would throw a nice little sinker at 80 miles an hour, then a lot of the times I would jam right-handed hitters and get a weak ground ball.
Yeah.
But I think that instinctively I kind of figured some of that stuff out. And that's what's so amazing about today's game, how we have all this amazing technology like Rapsodo and using like a motor sleeve to be able to measure like the amount of stress acquiring through the elbow and stuff like that. They're all tools that I feel like if you're a kid today and you're not trying hard enough as far as like getting all that information, I feel like you're not wanting it as much because if I was like 14, 15 and I had all this stuff, man, you best believe I would have been all.
I would have killed for that information at 14, 15. I would go and buy I bought like a Bushnell radar gun for like $120, and it was, it was pretty effective, but I thought that was like, the epitome of what you could get in terms of like baseball data. And now that you have like spin rate, spin axis, extension, reach back to release, all this data that's so cool that you can play with now. And I got this baseball recently from Diamond Kinetics, and it's like it has an accelerometer or something in it, and it hooks up to your phone, and then every pitch you throw, it shows up, all the data shows up on an app on your phone, and it's really cool to see like spin rate and stuff. And I wish I'd gotten this information 10 years ago, but whatever.
And we sound like old guys, right?
Yeah, I know.
We sound like old guys. Like back in my day, I wish we had all this stuff, and really wasn't.
Oh yeah. But 26 is pretty old for a baseball player.
Yeah, it is, and but I think that's what's awesome about this game, that it's continuously evolving, and maybe we're just born in the wrong generation, or maybe it wasn't meant to be. I don't know, but it's really cool how, for me at least, to just have a teammate that has made it as far as you have. So that's really awesome, dude.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate
that. So let's talk about a little bit deeper about command and stuff. So we've kind of talked about what it's allowed you to kind of increase your velocity, right? You became more athletic. You worked on a lot of Olympic lifting and becoming more explosive through plyo work. How did you develop your command? I mean, was it just a process of playing catch all the time, throwing more bullpens? Did you constantly tinker with like different grips? Did you ever pay attention to mechanics, how that influenced movement? Like, dive into that on your personal experiences.
Yeah, I think a little bit of that was because my first year out of college, I wasn't really sure about baseball anymore. Like I wasn't sure if I was going to play, but I still threw and stuff, and I still kept my arm in shape. So instead of like thinking just like, oh, more power, I want to throw harder, I started thinking more like I want to change my delivery a little bit. I want to get back to a more conventional delivery like I had in high school. I want to increase my hip mobility a little. I want to fix my unilateral leg strength a little bit. So I started doing, I went to the gym, and instead of doing just a shit ton of cleans, I would do lunges. I did a lot of Bulgarian squats. I did a lot of one-legged work. And I feel like that was huge for my stability in my lower half, in my command. And then I also, because I had this kind of weird arm action going on in college where I kind of like dip down and there's like flip up at the last second. Mm-hmm. I changed that, and now I've got like a more conventional. I kind of just go back and I try to time it with my front foot strike. So and then I could just get on top of the ball more easily, and my arm drags a lot less. So that was huge in command too. And then just having a whole 9-month off season for my first time, because in college you play the whole year. You pretty much compete. You compete from September to May. So you got to always you've got to be pitching well pretty much the whole year. So you don't want to change stuff. But when you have a whole long off season, you can mess up. So it's working on not being afraid to fail, not feeling like I have to win a spot. That was really huge in increasing my command too. Just being able to try whatever I want.
And so, I remember you had some shoulder issues, right? You were playing at Avila.
More bicep.
Bicep tendonitis you kind of had in this area. I remember that. So do you think that the mechanics you had was an influence to that? Just because I remember you were very vertical, very linear to the plate. There was a lot of like, I'm going to kind of demonstrate here for people watching this video, but very up and down with this kind of movement. Do you think it was specifically that? Do you think it was just like maybe a lack of athleticism to where maybe your arm wasn't getting into a good slot?
Yeah, I
What
think
do you think?
at the time, I think my hip mobility was kind of fucked up. So I think and then having super, I was really overemphasizing this, like this movement, like I really needed that to pull back. And I think once my hip mobility got a little better, and I didn't have to like emphasize, it didn't have to come from the top as much. Like I was able to just let my arm relax, and my hip would kick through, and then the separation would feel natural. So I guess in college, my hip didn't kick through as fast, so I'd have to overemphasize that late flip. So that's probably what that was doing. What the problem was there with my bicep. So I think fixing that really made, because I honestly, the only arm problems I've had in the last 2 years since I've been out of college was maybe some little bit of elbow tendonitis here, but other than that, my arms felt really fresh. So I think that's probably what it was.
Yeah. So I got another question for you. I don't know what your take is on this. So recently, Eric Cressy had a podcast where I forget the name of the guy who did the podcast with him, who was his guest, but they were talking about chronic and acute overload. So basically, um, understanding the stress levels from throwing, and so acute means some for those that are listening. Those that are listening, it's just something that just kind of abruptly happens. So like quick example, if you are, pitching on a weekend in college, right? We have two double headers, Saturday, Sunday, and you threw maybe in 3 out of those 4 games. That is a huge acute load right there because it is just very consecutive days where you did that. A chronic load, we're looking about something that you were talking about, how in the college season you're going from September to May, right? Because we go through our fall season and then we're preparing through the whole winter to begin in the spring. So, were you a guy that enjoyed throwing every day? Did you feel like there was a necessity to take time off? Did you take time off? Because there's all these questions all the time about how like throwing year round can be bad, but I feel like it's just understanding when you need to really ramp up your workloads that can prepare your body. So, do you think that? What first of all, what was your thought process behind it? Did you like throwing every day?
I mean, I like throwing every day because throwing's fun, but I found that like I felt like that was something I needed to do because college had kind of made me feel that I have to constantly be throwing. But my first year out of college, I just was like, screw this, I'm not going to throw for a while. I have no reason to be throwing anytime soon. So I basically just kind of took it easy on the throwing and just went to the gym mostly. And I would play catch here and there, stay loose, keep a release point going, but I honestly don't think you need to. At least I don't. I mean, these days, like if I don't have a season or if I have no reason to throw, I'm not going to throw. I decided like it's extra stress on your arm, and you can definitely keep reinforcing bad movement patterns. You can reinforce bad habits. I think you're honestly just better off letting your body rest and then forgetting, kind of having to like, almost learn how to walk again, I guess, like learn how to throw again a little bit. You don't want to keep repeating the same bad habits over and over again. You want to forget them. So I honestly, I've actually preferred taking a few months off and not taking the throwing as seriously since I've been out of college, and that might be contrary to what you remember about me throwing every day. But yeah, I'm a little different now when it comes to that.
Yeah. And so we evolve, right? Especially as you get older through, starting up from your youth days in high school, college, get to pro ball. We kind of just learn. I think if you pay enough attention to it, you learn how to listen to your body. You understand when it's a good day to maybe just play a little light catch, maybe just like 50 feet. Maybe push it as far as to 90. Some days we're feeling amazing. Let's go 200 feet. Let's long toss it. Let's throw it as far as we can. Other days, maybe we just want to throw rockets from, 120. So that's something that I think is really important for any of our young listeners here.
Yeah.
You got to try to listen to your body, and it takes time. It takes a lot of experience. You gotta wait. You got to run a lot. You got to throw a lot. You got to experience throwing a high amount of pitches in bullpens. Maybe throwing back-to-back days in a bullpen, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Exposing your body to all these different stimulus, and a lot of that's dependent on what your role is, especially if you're going to be in a high school or college program. So yeah, I mean it's a loaded question, right? There's all these subjective measurements of trying to figure out, okay, what's going to be the best formula here, and the truth is there's no magic formula.
Right? No, it's completely individual. I mean, obviously, the only thing is if your arm hurts or if you're not feeling that good, don't go out and throw rockets from 250 feet. Just obviously have to use your best judgment.
Mm-hmm. So just for our listeners as well, when me and Cage are teammates, we could be anywhere, anytime. We could probably talk for about 5 hours straight about pitching, right?
Yeah.
So what are like the biggest key points for you as far as like what you would recommend everyone should be doing as a pitcher? So, um, is there a certain sequence that you believe in as far as like the way that our hips move, relative to like our torso? Is there like a timing sequence that you sense maybe with an arm slot and where the arm needs to be? Can you kind of dive into that? What would you teach a lot of your students as far as what are some good pitching mechanics?
Well, I always every good pitcher I've seen, like no, they do it a little bit differently. It's not always the same. It doesn't always look the same with every pitcher, but every pitcher that's good, that throws hard, that has good mechanics, gets their back hip through. I always see the back hip rotation just like burst through while their arm comes right up. So that's a huge. That I think that's something that almost every pitcher needs to do is time that back hip with their arm action.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I also think that you should let I think keep I guess I think that pitching your arm action should be like it should be eccentric. Like it should be your arm should be stretching back and firing as opposed to just pulling your arm through and trying to rip it through as hard as you can. I think that's much healthier, more efficient, and you're going to. Let's see. Having a strong front leg. I see a lot of kids that their front leg gives and it absorbs all their force rather than pushes back up through the chain. I think obviously having a strong front leg, good knee stability, that's really important. So I think basically if you know how to use your lower half, if you know how to use your hips and just time that with your arm, that's to me those are good pitching mechanics. And it looks different. Some guys hold a lot of what Brent Porcio calls torsion, where their knee goes way out. It's way externally rotated out towards second base. Or some guys are more like me, where it internally rotates more. So when you're loading your back leg, so mine kind of like collapses more than some other guys. But it's not actually wrong or bad. It's just the way my body works compared to theirs. So it looks different with everybody. But as long as you're using your hips, as long as your arm comes up at a good time, and you're using your front leg to accelerate the ball.
Yeah, I agree with you, man. And like, I think it's one of like the best pitchers in the game. Like you got like a Max Scherzer, right? Like he's got some rotational movement, throws a little bit out from the side. You have a lefty in Kershaw who has that nice little pause and leg kick, kind of slows down, gathers himself, drops and goes. There's all these different ways to throw a baseball. Who are your favorite guys to emulate? Who do you like to watch pitch and pick up things from?
There was this one reliever on the Rangers that I really learned a lot from last year. I mean, he was with the Rangers from like 16 to 18. I think he's in the minor leagues now, but his name is Matt Bush, and
Oh,
he's similar height to me, 5'9", 5'10", somewhere around there, and he weighs. He's probably a bit heftier than me, but I really like how simple his mechanics were and how he just kind of I really liked how he loaded his back leg and how he drove his hip through and how everything was just it was like 97 miles an hour, but a super simple, easy delivery for being a pretty undersized, short guy. So he was one guy I really watched a lot, and I learned from a lot in the last couple of years. Um, let's see. I was big into Tim Lincecum when I was in college and high school, but I just realized like it's really unless your hip mobility is just off the charts, you really can't emulate someone like that. And I would try to in some ways, but it just never really worked out. So uh, I was a big fan of watching Matt Cain on the Giants because his delivery was, and again, not a lot of momentum. He doesn't move super fast. He's not a crazy athlete for his size, but he's just got such smooth arm action. Everything's so well timed. Uses hips super well. Um, just does everything in moderation and produces a really good result. So he's a guy I like to watch. Um, and there was this one major leaguer that was on San Rafael with me, ex major leaguer. His name was Yalen Piguero, and he's 39 years old, throwing 94 to 96 miles an hour, and some of the best I've ever seen. But his delivery, not a big guy, about my size. He not a lot of momentum. His back hip kicks through, and his arm just flips up, and it's just super fluid. So he's another guy I was honestly learned a lot from watching. That was a major leaguer, and yeah, those are some guys off the top of my head that I feel like I can emulate pretty well. I don't emulate the fast movers that well. Like guys who just fly down the mound. If you can think of any of those guys that just super long strides, super fast, I'm not like that. I don't
yeah.
move that way. So I like watching guys that are a bit slower, shorter stride guys that are
Uh,
maybe shorter
and
in
that's
height.
Dude, because like I'm trying to remember some of the guys I like watching. Justin Verlander was one of my dudes that I always loved looking at, and I love the basin that stood out to me even at a really young age was the way that he would plant down with that front foot, and the amount of like force you can just see it how his leg is bent and it
Mhm.
almost like completely straightens out. Such a
Yeah.
stiff leg, and like I would remember once I started really doing deadlifts when we started strength conditioning, up in college. I kind of just started to see how like that force production from that leg makes a huge difference on the mound. And I remember they must have been my sophomore year at Avila where I went through a little time period where I was kind of tinkering with some mechanics, and I tried to do a little bit of that Verlander kind of stride and planning, and I felt like it really kicked up my velocity, but I probably didn't have the very good mobility and stability in my hips because I started to have some pain going down my leg, around my knee, and my
Oh,
hip.
really?
And so I kind of shut that down, even though it gave me some velocity increases that I liked. But that was a guy that I kind of thought about who was probably a little bit quicker down the mound.
Yeah, like he's a guy I don't think I could emulate. I'm thinking of his delivery right now, and I like his front leg extension. That's something I think, possibly try to emulate. But the way he moves down the mound, the way he loads on that back leg is something I physically can't do. I just don't think my anatomy is built for that. So, and I agree that sometimes you watch these guys and you're like, oh, I want to do that, and maybe it does help your velocity, but it's also a double edged sword in that maybe you're pushing a little bit too much, and
You're
it's
compensating for other things that you probably were lacking in, but now you are, paying
yeah,
the price in another way. Uh,
exactly.
and so, yeah, so that's something I think that maybe at a young age I didn't really understand was, trying to look for guys that are similar to you. You talked about like your body type, that you're not a very big and tall guy. Neither am I. I'm probably a little bit more short and stockier than you are. But I always looked at like taller, slender kind of guys for mechanics just because I love what they did. And so that always kind of creeps my mind. Like,
Oh yeah.
what if I would have looked at other smaller guys? Like, I remember watching Zack Greinke pitch a lot.
Yep.
But he's not short by any means. He's probably, what, like 6'1", maybe 6'2". So
Yeah. And
he's
he's
probably
he's
average height, pretty average height. But I just love like the small, deliberate, how you just kind of
yep.
slow down and then little by little he would speed things up. And he was very Greg Maddox, like how when he would finish his delivery, his body is really straightforward.
Yeah, that's why I
So,
like guys like Matt Cain. Like, I mean, I'm tempted to look at guys like Zach Davies on the Brewers, like that
uh-huh,
really skinny dude.
yeah,
I like. Okay, you can argue that I'm not 220 pounds or anything, and I should look at a guy like Zach Davies, but his super skinny guys like that have such like crazy ranges of motion that I don't have. So I agree. Like, I think I'm more like a Greinke or a Matt Cain. Like, I don't have crazy mobility, and in some ways I do. Like, I can get into a super deep squat, but in terms of my pitching mechanics, I don't have crazy mobility, and I have to watch someone that just times their movements well, has a compact delivery, and mostly just times everything well. So I agree with you on that.
uh-huh. Yeah, it's all interesting. And so, going back to like us when we were teammates in college, like I always chased that velocity, and because that was the biggest thing that I lacked. And so, um, there was a lot of things that I learned through the process. Some things that my body paid the price for, as far as like back injuries and stuff like that. I feel like understanding the process between taking your body to an elastic place to where you're very mobile, you have a lot of flexibility, your body can rotate in all these directions. But there's also a component to it to where you need to have that compactness, that firmness, that postural stiffness of the body, so that way the energy transfers through.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that? And what's your take on that? Like, how would you describe that feeling, that fine line between the two? How would
Yeah,
you describe that with your pitching experiences?
it's say band, pull it way back. It might not fire as hard as if you have like a short tight rubber band. You just pull it back, and it's like, so. I think it's kind of like that. Like, if you're like Gumby, and if you got all this range of motion and you're just super loose, like, I just don't think there's enough tension to really fire it that hard. Whereas if, like I said, if it's a short, stocky, like thick rubber band that you just pull back and just fires, I think that's more the way to be. Honestly, I think that's why when you see a short guy who's stocky that actually does, get into some good hip to shoulder separation, who actually does have good momentum and speed going through his body, that's why they throw so hard. And I think that's something people don't talk about a lot. Like in minor leagues, in independent ball, you see a lot of shorter guys that throw hard. Like it's something you don't maybe see a lot at the college level or in the major leagues, but there's a whole like subcategory of hard throwers that are short and stocky. And if they can actually get the hip to shoulder separation, the ball takes off.
And so, do you believe that's something that you can just train with like exercises, or do you think it's just something about like understanding the biomechanics, like understanding what your muscles are asked to do, and then being able to execute that to produce the balance of that elasticity and tackness? Like, what do you think?
Yeah, I think trying to train that, let's say if you're 22 years old and you don't already have that, you're gonna have you could train it, but you're gonna have a hell of a time trying to. It seems like a lot of the guys that I've seen that are like that, it's something maybe they developed through their teen years as they grew up and they developed. They probably did a lot of weightlifting. It might not have necessarily been to increase their velocity, but there probably is just some training they did on the side and where they did to supplement baseball, and then eventually it ended up having a huge in their later years and their velocity and stuff. So yeah, you can train it, but I think a lot of it you can't. I think you have to really build a foundation early in your career. That's what I think at least.
Right on, man. So share with the audience some really cool baseball stories that you might have. Any fun road trips, any like fun moments? I know that you got to play with Brandon Phillips for a little bit, right?
Oh, that was cool.
Yeah.
And so there was another one where I was on the Black Sox road trip and we played the Cleburne Railroaders, and I heard that Rafael Palmeiro himself, senior, was on the team. So I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. He's probably not going to play in a spring training game. And he hit the year before he hit 301 with 9 home runs in the American Association, and that's pretty good through 125 bats. So I'm pitching. I end up going into that game and I'm pitching, and I'm throwing pretty well. And then Rafael Palmeiro steps up, and I'm like, wow, like this is crazy. So cool. I get him. Yeah, so I get him to an 0-2 count, and then I throw 2 fastballs in the black outside that are strikes, but the umpire is not going to ring up Rafael Palmeiro to some nobody. So whatever, 2-2 count. So I another fastball, hits a little pop up the shortstop, and I'm like, I just got Rafael Palmeiro out. And as I'm walking back in the dugout, he looks at me, he's like, hey, and he gets my attention. He says, those are good pitches, man. And I was like, fuck yes, Rafael Palmeiro just said I just threw good pitches. And so that was pretty cool. And also, I mean, yeah, playing with Brandon Phillips was cool. So he was my manager, PJ. He was his brother, and yeah, he came on with the squad for a little bit. He bought us dinner every night. It was really nice of him. Really, really just nice, cool guy. It was really encouraging to be around. Really positive presence. And to be honest with you, it kind of almost showed how strong independent ball is, because it's not like he came in there and just dominated. I mean, he got struck out twice by one of the pitchers on Napa. And he hit well. He hit a home run. He got his hits. I'm not like saying he didn't do well, but I mean, it just shows how close independent ball is actually to the very highest levels of baseball, like the major leagues. So that was really cool experience to play with him.
So just a question about indie ball. What does it take to get signed again? I mean, as a pitcher, you just got to hit a certain amount of velocity. I mean, is it a combination of you got to also dominate? Like, is there a threshold of like statistics that you probably need to get to? Like, what's that?
Well, it depends. Like, if you're trying to get signed as a rookie and you have no professional experience, then yeah, it's going to take. You have to throw hard. I didn't throw super hard in front of PJ, but he didn't even care about the velocity. He just wanted to see some good movement, someone that could throw strikes and help the team. So I got kind of lucky in that the day I got signed, I was probably throwing 86 to 87. I wasn't throwing super hard, but he didn't care. But now, in most people's case, yeah, as a rookie, you're going to have to throw hard. You probably have to have some college stats. And then with me, though, I mean, I've already got my foot in the door. I have 2 seasons of pro numbers, so that kind of gives me a lot of credibility. So I could probably start emailing teams now. It doesn't mean I'm going to get a job next year. It doesn't mean anything. There's no promises in independent ball. But it sure helps to have a lot of pro numbers. I think, like let's say at the Frontier League draft that I went to in April, the reason why I got invited back for the second day wasn't because I blew up the radar gun or did anything amazing on the first day. It was because they saw that I have a full year in the Pacific Association. So they're like, okay, he's got pro numbers, he's got a full season, didn't get released. We'll invite him back to the second day. So, and I think of it also is who having contacts, having scout references, and knowing coaches. I think indie ball is a lot of who as well as what you can do. So never ever you have to network, you have to make connections, you have to make friends, you have to be cool with the veterans, you have to be cool with the manager. There's no like if you're standoffish, if you're aloof, if if you got an attitude, you better back it up because you're going to be gone quick if you start messing up. And you don't want to have a bad reputation. I've seen guys with bad reputations that, are known as certain types of players that have an attitude, and they don't get picked up because people hear about that and they don't want them. So, just stuff like that. It's a tough road. It's cutthroat. The promise over to anybody. I've seen amazing players slump and get released, and I've seen them nobody stick around because they were producing. So it's all about production.
Yeah. So, best part and worst part of being an indie ball player?
With the worst part is that you're kind of treated like cattle. You kind of always got to make sure that you're with the right crowd. You got to make sure you're not saying things behind people's backs that might get back to the managers or that person. You don't get fed much. It's a lot of, you don't get paid much. It's a grind. You might have to live into some bad housing situations. You got to love it. I mean, you're not gonna have fun doing it if you don't love it, especially if you're not living I got the luxury of living at home and being able to commute the game, so that would help a lot. But the best part, I mean, you're getting to play baseball at professional level. You're getting to play with all these amazing players. You're getting to play with guys that play in the major leagues. You're getting innings against people that you dreamed playing against. You get to call yourself a professional baseball player.
Yeah.
And yeah, you get to see how you stack up. You get to see how, you just realize you can really do it. Like it doesn't take you don't have to really be that special. You just gotta be, pretty good. You gotta get signed, and then it's all about how you compete and produce from there. So it's a really cool experience.
Just feeding that competitive nature you got.
It's all about competing. It's all about being mentally tough. Like once your foot's in the door, it doesn't matter. None of your stuff matters. None of your college stats matter. None of your velocity your velocity doesn't matter. It's just about competitiveness and being mentally tough.
Yeah. Awesome, man. I got one more question for you. What does mentally tough mean to you?
It means don't be afraid of failure. Like that's the number one thing that players at this level is being scared. Like let's say they have a bad outing. Oh, like they're worried about getting released the next day. You can't if you want to be successful, you cannot have that in your head at all. You like one of my good friends this year, his name is DJ Sharabi, got picked up by the Cleveland Railroaders, and I was watching his season. He had a few games where he got roughed up, like 5 runs in an inning against Kansas City T-Bones, and then next day he would go out and throw 2 shutout innings with 4 punch-outs. Like that to me is being mentally tough. Not letting your last bad performance affect you and going out and throwing your A stuff the day after a bad performance. Not being scared of the situations. So many guys get scared. So many guys don't want to pitch with runners on base. So many guys don't want to inherit situations. So many guys are afraid to throw strikes because they think their stuff's gonna get hit. So many guys are afraid to walk people. Like just not being afraid of any of that. To me, that's being mentally tough.
Well said, Cage.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
All right, man. Well, thank you for taking the time, man. It's really awesome to catch up with you again.
Yeah, it was a pleasure.
But yeah, real quick, where can people find you? Social media, any emails, stuff like that.
Okay, well, I mean, you can find me on Instagram, Cascone4490. You can find me on Facebook with my full name. Just type in my name, it'll come up. My email is cage.cascone@gmail.com. I got Snapchat. I don't even know what my username is because I barely use it. And yeah, I'm always willing to talk pitching and baseball with people. If anyone ever wants to reach out and ask questions, I also got a Twitter. Just type in my name and you'll probably find my Twitter. I use my Twitter exclusive for baseball, so I like talking baseball in there too. So
cool.
Yeah,
we'll put that in the show notes. And for all you listeners and viewers tuning into this show, Cage is an awesome guy just to have conversations with. And so, thanks again, man. And I'll just be in touch with you soon, brother.
Yeah, thank you. You're an awesome guy to have a conversation with too. So, yeah.
All right, Cage. Hey, bud.
That's our interview with Cage Cascone. If you'd like to contact Cage, check out the show notes below, and please feel free to leave us with all your comments and questions. Cage was one of my favorite teammates to talk about pitching back when we were in college. And if you're a young pitcher looking for some pointers, I highly recommend reaching out to Cage and picking his brain. Mechanics, pitch design, training, you name it. I'm certain he will give you some good stuff. If you like the show, please make sure to subscribe to our podcast and YouTube channel where you can access more interviews and other Mo baseball and training content. You can find our social media content on Instagram, Facebook at Mo Baseball and Training, as well as my baseball Twitter page at CoachMo_MBT. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the blog for more awesome content at mobaseballandtraining.com. Once again, thank you for watching and listening. We have more podcast interviews coming your way, so stay tuned. This is the Mo Baseball and Training Podcast.